All right.
Alrighty, let's go.
State of flow. Welcome back to the SOF podcast. Russ, can you kick us off this time?
Absolutely. Yeah, so we just want to introduce to our viewers what the whole SOF concept is. So it's the new wave of entrepreneurship. So everyone right now, there's going to be so many kids who are in high school, or even you're just in that weird phase where you've graduated, you could potentially go into university, or you're just working some job that you don't like. You're just trying to figure out life. So the whole message of our podcast is we're speaking to you guys. We're literally doing this to show you what stage we are in our entrepreneurial journeys. We're early on, but we've developed a lot of skills and a lot of things that have, I would say, really transitioned our life trajectory. And that's going to be exactly what SOF's about. We're just going to be teaching, showing other entrepreneurs exactly how to be successful and create something of your own in the gig economy now. So yeah, all our viewers, tune on in. We're early on in starting this, but it's stuff that we love. We truly love talking business, mindset, health, wealth, relationships. And right now, like I would say all three of us, we're at the stages where we're not truly like crushing it, but we're on the pace to really change our lives. And it comes down to everything that we talk about here.
Yeah, and I think like a big part of what we're trying to push is like, there's a lot of things right now about like hustle culture. And yes, you need to hustle, you need to work your ass off, but there's a point of diminishing returns when you're hustling. You basically get to the point of burnout. And what we're trying to say with being in a state of flow throughout your entire life is you're so dialed in, you're so systemized that you don't get burnt out. You're very high level, like you have high levels of productivity while also being able to spend time with family, to do activities that you enjoy outside of just work. So it's not just grind 24/7. While we do agree it's important to work very, very hard, otherwise you're not going to be successful. There is a point of diminishing returns. And what we're just trying to say is if you just structure your life in a very balanced way where you can live and flow. And I guess balance is the wrong word to use, right? Because a lot of people use balance are like, well, I'm going to sit on the couch and watch Netflix because balance. I don't agree with that. If you're depending on, I guess it depends on what your goals are. But if you're trying to be a high level entrepreneur, I don't agree with that. But it's a function of systemizing your life so that you do have time for family, you do have time for friends, you do have time for passions, while also high level getting a lot of work done and deep work.
Definitely. Like I like what Russ said about passion. Like SOF is a lot about what are you passionate about? Like what is your unique lifestyle? Like people see like Gary Vaynerchuk. I absolutely love Gary Vaynerchuk. I think he's incredible. But a lot of people will not resonate with that lifestyle. I truly like believe that the average person does not want to hustle at the level of Gary Vaynerchuk. But when you see Gary Vaynerchuk, he's in his state of flow.
Yeah.
He's like, he loves to hustle like that. It fires him up. Like he gets up, he's like, let's work. And it like actually energizes him. That's him like molding his life to uniquely like what fits for his personality. And that's really what SOF is about, is like figure out what do you value, what kind of life do you want, and optimize for that. Like I think this might have been from Hermosi or something. It was, what are you optimizing for? I was like, fuck, that's a really good question. Mm-hmm. Like, are you optimizing for happiness? Well, you're going to need a certain set of like lifestyle or a certain type of lifestyle to optimize that way. Are you optimizing for success? You're probably going to trade some happiness, because the second you have a goal that you're working towards that you don't have, you're instantly going to lose a little bit of happiness because your desire is not achieved. So are you optimized for success? Are you optimized for happiness? Or are you optimized for what you would consider to be balance? I would say that like figure out what you want and what you value, optimize for it, and just live your life authentically to you. Just because some guy online says, hustle, 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 you got to make $1 million, you got to be a billionaire because that's what successful people do, doesn't mean that you have to live your life that way. It honestly might not resonate with you.
Yeah, that's a good point. Defining what true success is.
Yeah, true success for you, because it's very different. Like I got some friends who are not entrepreneurial at all. And the idea of like getting up every day and grinding on a business to them is a fucking nightmare. They're like, I don't want to do that. Like I would rather do yoga and have fun. And like, I just like being in communities. I don't need to hustle and make all this money. And then, you know, me personally, I feel like I'm falling short of my expectations if I'm not like putting in those hours every day extracurricularly, we'll say on business, things like that. Like if I just like sit around all day and do yoga and like maybe work out and just do these things, like I actually feel at the end of the day worse about myself. I'm like, that I just fell short of my ideal because this isn't the direction I want to go in. It's like it's so person dependent.
100%. That's like exactly like what people are going to be coming to our channel and listening to our podcast are for us. We're going to share exactly us doing all these things in real time. You know what I mean? We're so early on in our entrepreneur journeys where we're just starting to figure out what it's going to take in order for us to hit that next step. And it's going to be exactly that kid that, hey, he may be staying up at night thinking about all the dreams, all the aspirations, every single thing that he wants to achieve. But then the next morning when his alarm clock goes off, he doesn't get up.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Or then, you know what I mean? The person that has all these ideas, but doesn't actually ever go reach out to someone in that industry to talk to them about what it's like to be in there, you know, and that's what we're going to share. It's just gonna be a little snippets and little ideas and things that you could do listening to it and just be like, hey, I'm going to try that and see if it works. Doesn't work for you. Okay, move on. And going back to success, like we die of comparison every single day. Every single day. It's the worst thing about social media, all that stuff. You see these people traveling the world, living this lavish lifestyle. And it's like, hey, define what you want early on. Because just like you said, setting goals and expectations is going to eliminate happiness because you're going to be striving for more. You're not going to feel fulfilled because you're like, oh, I got to achieve this and then it'll work. Mm-hmm. And yeah, goal setting and all those things are very important if you want to be a high achiever. But don't be thinking, hey, know where you're at. A lot of people, they want to do something crazy. They want to have a business. They want to become mega successful. But internally, do they really want to?
What's the reasons?
What's your reasons, right? So like if that's the route you're going, you're going to have to realize that I will not have a balanced lifestyle. And going back to Gary Vee, him not having a balanced lifestyle and knowing at the end of the day that he is grinding, doing everything he can to make it happen and buy the New York Jets, like he likes to say, is what fulfills his cup. That's what fucking puts it in there, makes him psyched about life. Where for some people, it's like, hey, maybe I just want to be able to make $100,000 a year that I can live off of, but I'm my own boss. Just decide. And then don't flip back and forth. Don't just one day be like, okay, I'm going to start creating this massive business. I'm going to start trying to change the world. But then the next day you're back to, oh, I just want to make $100,000, which is totally fine. Like we're not saying that that's not okay just to live the normal lifestyle, or like you're saying, your friends that just want to do yoga. Just don't be sitting thinking at night, like, I wish I could have done this. Just go and do it.
Yeah. Action over knowledge. Mm-hmm. Right?
I would agree with that. I've been thinking about that a lot lately, actually, is how do you bridge the knowing doing gap? Like, if you think about most people's problems, it is the knowing doing gap. Like, I know I should do this, but I don't do it.
So I actually think a good portion of that would be you're knowing too much so that you're bogged down to start.
Like you're thinking too much about all the things that need to be done instead of just taking that next
you're like
step.
You literally like think you're like, it'd be like you're thinking you have all 10 steps laid out. Well, how the fuck do you get to 10, like step 1 when you're thinking about all 10 steps at once? It's a function of like, what is the first thing I need to do? Move in that direction and then learn, because chances are the second step that you think it is not actually what the second step is. You only find out when you're moving forward. And I think that's why back in the day it was probably easier for people, because they didn't have social media. They didn't have all this information at their fingertips. Yeah. And especially now when you look at TikTok, how they just like, you'll have all these like guys that are just feeding them constant information, advice, and tips. But like 90% of it just bogs them down.
Yeah.
It's a function of like, decide what you want to do, take a little bit of knowledge with you, move forward, fail forward, and then go back, learn a little bit more, move forward. But you just need to like take action. But I think it's like people get caught up in their mind and they're like, you know what? I don't know what step, I don't know where to start. And then they just become overwhelmed and they don't do anything, instead of just being like, oh, I should try this. Okay, I'm just going to go in that direction.
So do you think in order to take that action, take that step forward, it has a lot to do with getting into like a state of flow, like a flow state? And like making sure that you can move ahead? Or
I think once you're in that motion.
yeah.
Yeah, I don't think it's a function of starting. It's like when you're in the motion of like actually taking action, doing things, that's when I would think you would start to reach a state of flow. And that's also when you're just like kind of in deep work, high productivity, and you just,
Yeah.
it's almost like a feeling of just knowing. Like, I know in my gut this is the right direction I need to take, and that's why I'm going there right now. Instead of being like, I don't know which direction, I'm going to go back and YouTube it, and then you waste 3-4 hours.
Yeah, man, so many things you said that I'm like, fuck, that's actually so good. Like, I started to think about what is the usefulness of thinking 10 steps ahead? Like, really, why is that even useful? Why can we do it? Well, it's useful because let's say you're going to drive from LA to Seattle or something. I don't even live in America, so I don't know how far of a drive that even is. But you're going to drive from like LA to Seattle. You want to know, okay, I need to do this city to this city to this city to this city to then get to Seattle. So you actually need to think ahead. But you made a good point that if you don't know the path for sure, you've never walked it, thinking ahead that many steps is probably not useful at all because you don't actually know what the steps are.
Yeah, I think like here would be a good example. If it would almost be the sense of, first off, if you know the direction you want to go, let's say you want to start an e-commerce company or something, right? In the haircare space. Well, then go and research the companies that have been around for 10 years, see what like it took to get to that point, understand it at a macro level, and then go back to the drawing board, build out your 10-year plan, decide of the direction you want to go, and then kind of keep that as your North Star, work your way backwards. And instead of being like, okay, well, according to this plan, I need to go step 1, 2, 3 to get to the 10-year, $10 million goal or whatever it be like, okay, step 1 is source the product, everything, and then I'll move forward from there. Once I've sourced the product, then I'm going to learn marketing. But instead of researching it all at once, just take it in small stages. So like from a macro level, you should always know the direction you're going because you could be going in the wrong direction without proper planning. But at the same time, I think it's important that you don't bog yourself down with all this information at once, and instead, and also don't compare yourself to like a company that's been around and doing like incredible either. So it's just a function of, this is the direction I know I need to go, move forward that way.
Yeah.
I think Tom Bilyeu provides like great insight into what he does when he's figuring out where to start a business or what he needs to do to achieve his goals. So yeah, like we're always taught if you don't plan, you fail. You always have to have the end in mind, which is good. Like I would say, yeah, I still do that. Yeah, I still do that for all my goals and everything but I really like how he breaks it down as, okay, so if this is what I'm trying to do, and I can relate this to me in my real estate sales. So, okay, this is the amount of goals. This is how many transactions I want to do this year. And then you break it down instead of like having so many individual goals. It's like, what skills do I need to develop to achieve that goal? And then you prioritize whatever skill you think is most valuable to get those instant sales. So I know for mine was becoming a better salesman. So then all I did was learn salesman training for the first little bit. Okay, I need to be able to close better. Find your style of closing. This is how when I meet someone, I make them a client, I make them a customer. And then as soon as I did that, obviously my sales increased. Now I have more capital. Okay, now I focus on marketing. How do I now market more effective so I reach a broader audience to scale quicker? Okay, now we've done that. Now we were going into indirect marketing, because before we're doing direct marketing just to get those quick sales. But now we're in this phase of like, let's build a brand. Let's get those people that are going to know us. Everyone, when they walk around, they're going to talk about us. They can see us. And then in 5 years from now, we've built up a brand where we have a continuous amount of sales, not just relying on the direct. So now, like I would say, what phase I'm in and what skill I'm trying to acquire is scalability. Yeah. And that might not necessarily, a lot of people would define that as a skill, but I'm trying to learn how I can scale my business with it not just being me that does it all. How do I repeat this business or teach other people and scale up, still making the net income that I want, but not having it to rely on me working 80 hours a week to facilitate it. And then you just goes in phase. After I scale it, then I'm just going to have to learn how to actually monetize it. How can I continue to repeat this year after year? And so in any business, say you could take your e-commerce one. Okay, I want to start an e-commerce site. Well, where do you start? Well, probably you're going to need a website. Do you know how to web design? Okay, no. Then you're probably going to have to figure it out if you don't have any money. If you got a little bit of capital, okay, farm that out. Find someone. What's the next thing? Okay, well, I need to learn how to, drive traffic to that e-commerce website. Okay, so now, well, how do you do that? And you just acquire all the skills with the end goal in mind. And eventually you've just evolved each step of the way.
Love that.
It sounds like what you guys are saying is if you're going to look at the big picture, just do it high level and not in details.
Yeah.
Like save details for the next step. Save the big picture for just high level.
Just high level. Yep. 100%.
Question that I have for you guys after hearing Russ's thoughts on scaling. Do you guys think that any time a business goes to scale, they have to first take a step back to take a massive step forward?
I would say yes, just because now a lot of my time is going towards training people. Now I have to train people, so my production isn't as laser focused as it was before.
Yeah.
And has it taken a step back? No, not necessarily. But then you kind of reflect on what happens if I was just still laser focused on getting sales.
Yeah.
And not having to train other people.
I agree. I think you do have to take the step back because you have to unlearn certain things to be able to learn how to scale properly.
Yeah.
It'd be like the classic small business owner who trying to get him to scale, but then he's still going to try and do everything himself.
Yeah.
You can't scale that way. So you have to have that person unlearn a bunch of things to then realize, okay, I need to delegate, learn how to delegate, teach other people how to do certain tasks.
Yeah.
And that's the only way you're going to scale.
I find it just super funny, especially the small business owners, is their thing is they always say that they do it better than the person.
Yeah.
And I think that's just something you're going to have to accept, because whoever you hire, they're not going to be as passionate about your baby that you've made, your business. You just have to accept that, but you yourself have to learn, how can I teach them where now me not focusing on this actually makes our business more profitable.
You know what I think a big portion of that too is being very open-minded and letting somebody else's skill set lead that division, for example. So you might think you know the best way for the company, but you do need to be very open-minded. It's like the classic scenario with BlackBerry. The CEO was adamant on not branching off and just focusing on their BlackBerry Messenger. And from that ended up, I think, what was it? WhatsApp was then created from that. There's something along those lines that basically they didn't innovate fast enough, but there was employees in BlackBerry's company that were pushing, being let's just go straight as a messaging app. Just straight into a messaging app. And then you look at iPhone, the iMessage came in and just wiped the BBM out. But BlackBerry Messenger was the thing back in the day. And what happened with the CEO is he just could not learn. He thought he knew the right direction for the vision and wasn't open enough to listening to some of the employees where they're this is where things are headed. Why aren't we going that direction?
Yeah. Grandiosity. Well, it seems like grandiosity and arrogance is what wipes out a lot of those CEOs. Even reading Bob Iger's biography on how he took over Disney and scaled it to when it almost tanked. Back when we were kids, Disney almost went under. It was just run by it was basically just being run by a terrible CEO at the time. He came in and he did help Disney in the really early days and he did a lot of good. But when it came time to innovate again, he wasn't the guy to do the job. Mm-hmm. And he ended up, the funny thing is, because he was in a position of power, he really didn't want to lose his power and he wanted to keep that reputation as the CEO. So he ended up firing a lot of the really good executives because he felt threatened by them.
Yeah, ego.
It's a lot of ego there. So I think ego, imagine becoming a billionaire and you have all this capital, all this success, people are praising you. And then 5 years later, it's time for innovation again because the world's just constantly changing, adapting, and you're no longer that guy, but you still hold on to that identity. Damn, if you're not flexible, you're going to wipe yourself out.
In Jim Collins' How the Mighty Falls, he said one of the number one reasons why companies fails is hubris. So literally the leaders thinking they know, like resistant to change is because they think they know it all. They think they're the greatest thing. And it's a major downfall in high level business people.
Yeah.
You guys think that was the downfall of Twitter and why Elon ended up buying it?
We're getting into it. Let's go.
Well, I haven't looked into it as much personally. Right. So I want to see your guys' takes. I hear a lot of people saying, like Kevin O'Leary, I watched a video with him, really big on business and everything. And he's like, Twitter as a company, the CEOs and the executives have just been like tanking the company
100%.
more and more, like, and it's not getting better. So he's like, thank God. He's like, Elon needs to come in, fire like a majority of the employees and replace all the high level execs and just like redo this company.
That's why we're seeing that meme with Ari Gold just walking around with the paintball gun, like just taking them out. But I actually, like everybody's been saying how the executives, like the board of directors and everything, they were the reason that Twitter's been just, it's not even tanking. Twitter's just kind of baselined this entire time while everybody else is innovative. They've just like baselined and like took forever to, innovate, do all these things. And I think that's what had a lot of issues with like Jack Dorsey is I think he wanted to continually innovate quite a bit of Twitter and they just wouldn't let that happen.
Yeah.
So I think now that Elon's coming in and he's a visionary, he's huge innovator. He's just going to revamp the whole company. Like to the point of the theory is, and it'll, time will tell, but the theory is that he's going to take Twitter and turn it into the first like quote unquote DSOS, which is like a decentralized social media.
Yeah.
And that's how he's going to have, the algorithms as like essentially open source so everybody can see how the algorithm works. And what's interesting is like back in 2019, Jack Dorsey was still CEO of Twitter, and they had a project inside Twitter called Blue Sky. And it was to study, research, and learn how to implement a decentralized social media protocol that essentially could be multiple social medias that could all interact with each other through this protocol. And essentially, I think basically what happened was the board was just resistant to it, or something internally happened that caused Blue Sky to not really be able to push and innovate. So then Blue Sky left Twitter and is now independent, raised like $14 million. And Jack Dorsey is now on the board for Blue Sky. And basically what their goal is now is to just continually research decentralized social media protocols and see, how it can be improved, how it can actually become, the new wave of social media, essentially. And so some people have the theory that like Jack Dorsey actually went to Elon and they kind of mastermind this whole thing to the point where Elon bought Twitter, and now they're going to use the research from Blue Sky to actually implement a decentralized social media protocol within Twitter.
It doesn't sound that far-fetched. Like it's kind of like a mini conspiracy, but it's I would say it's not that far-fetched at all. A question I have for you guys, because I think, well, especially maybe Landon, you guys are more up on DeFi than I am, is it possible for Twitter to go decentralized and still be a highly profitable company, or would it actually tank the profits and give too much power to the users?
I think it can potentially help their bottom line, their net income.
Really?
So when you go totally decentralized, there's going to be so many different things that they do differently. And don't get me wrong, this technology is so far out, and I definitely haven't studied it a ton, but just from my understanding of how people are going to run their companies on a decentralized thing, on a protocol, on a blockchain, is now say your payroll. Your payroll is typically one of your biggest expenses, the software and stuff you actually use to pay your employees. If you go on the blockchain, you no longer have all those expenses of just paying out your employees. So like the software they use to make sure their taxes are correctly, they're paid out correctly, all that stuff is one of their highest expenses for keeping their employees on, for the cost of having employees. Wow. So now you change that where it's all done instantaneously on the blockchain through software, through things. You could probably just have a couple people looking after it instead of having this massive people looking over payroll. Same with smart contracts, So anything that goes on legal or any kind of that area of things is going to save them a lot of money in terms of doing stuff like that. There's going to be a few other areas that it could potentially improve your net income, where some of these old expenses that used to be just very common business expenses will be potentially getting phased out. But then again, all the research and development that goes into developing the protocol on the blockchain and like beta testing and systematizing is usually one of the most big. It is a big expense in every company's research and development. So they'll have its pros and cons, but in the initial phase, it'll definitely be costly to develop everything. But 10 years down the line, it will phase out a lot of old business expenses.
So the question would be essentially, how is Twitter mainly monetizing right now? Do we know?
That's what I'm curious to ask you guys, because my understanding of a social media company is that a lot of its equity evaluation is the amount of information it has per user. At least I know Facebook is like this. How much information does it have on its users? The more users and information it has, the higher its valuation. So if you take a platform like Twitter, if it's valued from that that way, and then you make it decentralized, so everyone is able to use Twitter, but they're able to actually own their own information. I don't know I think that'd be possible through DeFi. Does that actually tank the equity of Twitter, even if DeFi lowers the base operating costs and the expenses in the long run by replacing those old methods? Wouldn't the equity evaluation of Twitter go down if it was decentralized?
So when it's running a decentralized social media, would run. Let me think about this here for a sec. I think the biggest thing, from a monetizable perspective, is people always kept talking about being able to tip people on Twitter. Tips, or even to the function of being able to have closed groups that you can pay to be a part of. And I think one way to monetize for Twitter is they could essentially offer those types of services for that creators can charge, and then they just take a small fee of what the creators charge, right, through the transaction of using. And I think they would use some form of cryptocurrency for that. Yeah. So I think from a a DeFi perspective, that's kind of what they'd implement there. And then from the decentralized social media perspective, I don't quite know. I'm going to dive into that and research it for the next podcast because I want to find out. But I do think it gives more power back. It brings more power back to the creators. And I think it'll also get rid of a lot of spam bots. So because what Elon wants to do to get rid of them is basically make every person have to authenticate themselves as a human.
Yeah.
Right. And eliminate a lot of the spam bots and whatnot. But in regards to the actual value that Twitter holds, I think regardless, the way Elon's going to innovate it, I think there's a shitload of value to be unlocked within Twitter. I think he's going to do that. Yeah. And I could even see him going as far as just losing, burning cash every year. I could see him being you know what? We're going to innovate. I don't care. Let's burn cash. Because he's not afraid to do that either. Yeah. Right. So he has no problem burning cash to innovate and push for years and years and years. Doesn't matter. Yeah. So I don't think for Twitter, it's not even a profit play. And it could be a 10-year play where they're we're going to lose money for the next 10 years, but we're going to pioneer decentralized social media.
Which would be wild. I don't know about you guys, but I would rather Elon pioneer it than Zuckerberg.
Wow. Zuckerberg wouldn't pioneer it. I'm never giving up this data. Are you kidding me?
Yeah. Well, isn't that the whole idea of Meta? Is he's we're going to be the ones that...
They're a centralized metaverse.
Yeah, well, that's what I always thought was kind of weird. Yeah. They wanted to launch the whole metaverse and stuff. But it seems like most people's idea of the metaverse that it would be decentralized and no one would own it. I don't know how you cross the innovation curve without someone centralizing it. So that's where I think there's a bit of a problem. But
yeah, you do need to have a good chunk of it centralized, unfortunately, but time will tell with that. I don't think he's the right person for it, but maybe he sees something we don't.
That's true. But I put all my trust in Elon to figure out this kind of stuff. I'm sure he's going to innovate in ways that we can't even predict.
Yeah, he's such a high level thinker and such a forward thinker that...
weren't you saying, Lanny, that you predict that he might add a video aspect to Twitter and really expand the platform?
Yeah, I mean, that's my theory. I think that Elon doesn't just kind of stop at one thing. He's going to push the boundaries throughout it all. So depending on how much time he puts into it, I could actually see him taking Twitter, getting it extremely popular again, to the point that like there's a lot of people that use it daily, and then under that kind of umbrella offer his own, like Twitter's own version of a YouTube, right? That is run decentralized. So then you're getting more people over there that know they're not going to be shadow banned, or they're not going to be canceled or kicked off for some of the videos. And then who knows, maybe he'd go as far as making his own version of a TikTok or, Instagram Reels perspective, right?
Twit talk.
Twit talk.
That's a good one.
That's what he should call it. Elon, please call it Twit talk. But I just think that like as he starts to innovate, I think he'll just keep pushing the boundaries.
Yeah.
And I think he's the person, I think right now TikTok is kicking everybody's ass. Like everybody, even YouTube, 100%. Like, Meta. He's the only one I think that could come in and like think 10 steps ahead to actually innovate to that degree that,
Here's maybe like a contrary point to that is I actually don't think in its current form that Twitter could compete with TikTok because it's text-based. And I think that actually holds it back from becoming as big as TikTok, because you're never going to get the same entertainment value, dopamine hits, like everything that makes TikTok what it is. I don't think you can get that from Twitter in its current form. So I think either he innovates so much that we're like, holy crap, he's seen like 10 years into the future and he transitioned Twitter or had offshoots of it that compete with these platforms, or he realizes that competing with them isn't even worth it. And Twitter just becomes more like, we'll say the news, basically. It just becomes a better version of the news.
Well, the whole, like people are saying Elon literally is buying the most powerful, app in this world. Like the mainstream media goes to Twitter to find out what's happening first.
He made a really good point where he said to him, Twitter is like the town square of old, where whenever you want to figure out something, you go to town square and you just talk with people. He's like, Twitter is like the world's town square where everyone just talks about things and shares information. And that's why he wanted to buy it, because he doesn't want the town square to be corrupted. Because if the town square is corrupt, then the city is corrupt.
But do you think because he's such a forward thinker, he's not going to try to copy other people? He's just going to try to create something else? Like, why go and like try to do something like YouTube when he could do something differently, or TikTok per se? Like, I think the audience for Twitter is the people that, like right now especially, are the people that like reading. They're like a lot of heavy intellectuals, things like that go there. If they pivoted, would they lose a good base of their audience? Or do you think, like, what's your perspective on them trying to copy what TikTok and YouTube?
It's an offshoot. It would never be like Twitter's going to stay the way Twitter is. Maybe one day he could figure out a way to like have it all in one app. I doubt it. I think that Twitter, he'll just optimize and make sure Twitter's just a little bit more fair when it comes to the algorithm. I'm just saying I could see him taking offshoots from Twitter, and basically because of his brand, his name, he could technically launch his own YouTube style. And it doesn't, I'm sure he'd actually probably make it better, right? But I'm just saying, like, if he's pioneering the way of like decentralized social media, who's to say through that own protocol, like whatever blockchain it's going to sit on, whatever the protocol will be, who's to say all these other offshoots of like its own TikTok version, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube won't be built? Maybe not even built by him. Maybe it's just going to be on that protocol, built by somebody else because they've left it open to developers to create.
Oh, and they can just fork off of it.
Kind of similar to how like Google has YouTube, it has Gmail, and so much more. We don't look at YouTube and be like, how the heck do you combine a video and an email service? They just happen to be two services by one umbrella. You're looking at it the same way, where like Twitter might be the overarching piece, or it even becomes one of the players in the overarching piece, but it has all these offshoots off of Twitter.
Yeah. And it probably won't be called Twitter. It might be called something else, or just a totally different platform. Yeah.
I don't think he'll rebrand the name, but like what's interesting is I've noticed Twitter, like kind of baseline for many, many years, they've had a little bit of an uptick only because of Web3. So everybody that wants to have, like, I even got back on Twitter to like learn more about, crypto, Web3, all that. You wonder if like Elon also saw that and is going to lean really heavy into that because the growing community on Twitter is actually like crypto enthusiasts, Web3 enthusiasts. And you wonder if that will help push the innovation even further and faster.
Totally.
I think
100% it will.
I think there's something there.
Just because like all the people that are really adopting crypto, they're like a huge believer in it. So if someone's going to come and innovate a platform where they can make it better and it's going to be decentralized and on the blockchain, like those crypto users are going to be like, they're going to be supporting it. They're going to be pushing it. They're going to be doing everything they can to be a part of it.
Yeah, completely agree. That's the more business aspect of the whole Twitter acquisition. What do you guys think about the more free speech aspect? Because that's where the real controversy is.
I want to know your thoughts.
Yeah, you start her off.
Shit, shouldn't have asked.
Yeah. Let's hear it.
I actually do. So I'm on the side of free speech personally. And I think people that are not on the side of Elon and free speech, I actually think that they misunderstand what he's going to do with the platform. And they're talking about issues that I don't think Elon would ever let happen. So like one of the big things I've seen watching some people's like comments on it, they're like, I don't want my kids to see hate speech. I don't want like my children exposed to certain topics. And Elon, like, what is he just going to open up to? Like, there's going to be porn on Twitter now? Like, what? It's free speech. We can just post whatever we want. It's like, who actually thinks that Elon Musk is going to buy Twitter and let there be pornography and let there be all this hate speech? Like, there's no way he's going to do that to the platform because that will kill the platform. And it's also just not right. Elon's not the kind of person that would do that. What he means by free speech is things that aren't, we'll say, like constitutionally harmful should not be banned on a platform. Like just because I have a difference of opinion from you does not mean that either of us should be banned. And he's doing it the right way where he says my critics are still allowed on this platform. The people who do not like me have a voice and they will not be shadow banned. How can you look at that and say this is the wrong step to take? He's just
and he
saying,
even said he hopes they continually criticize him.
Of course.
Right.
Like, I like his point where he says that he's optimizing for, I can't remember his exact language, but he's optimizing for the 80% in the middle. He's like, people on the far left are going to hate it. People on the far right are going to hate it. But I don't care because you can't optimize for them. You have to optimize for the middle. And I'm like, he makes a damn good point. He's not saying this is going to be a right-wing platform. It's going to be a left-wing platform. He's just saying that a difference of political opinion is not hate speech. And I think where people might get caught up and like where the big debate is what is hate speech? Like everyone has a different opinion on what is harmful. And that's where you run into a problem. If you have a company that is, we'll say, primarily left-leaning like Twitter, they tend to have a bias towards right-wing ideologies and political ideas being hate speech. Does that mean they're hate speech or are they just a difference of opinion?
And you had an interesting theory you had mentioned about if Elon would basically expose the algorithms the past 5 years, showing what's been pushed and what hasn't been pushed.
Dude, I think that could be one of the biggest controversies of like modern times is there's a lot of assumptions that you have to take into play with this one. But let's say that social media actually largely determines the outcome of elections because that's what people see. Like culture is what the younger generation like is interacting with, the ideas, what they're exposed to. If you get all these tech companies that all expose a certain culture to people and shadow ban different ideas and only allow certain ideas to cultivate, what if the past like 5 years, Twitter being primarily left-leaning has been like, we're going to shadow ban a majority of like Republicans, right-wing politicians, and we're going to just like boost the narrative of the left so more people see it, more people are exposed to it. That becomes the cultural norm. If Elon buys Twitter and exposes the past 5 years of algorithms and actually shows that like people on the right were like shadow banned or they never had the same reach as political parties on the left, what the fuck does that mean for our political system and the outcomes? Could people actually go to prison for that? Like some of these high level executives, like you rigged an election to some degree.
Do you think it's better left just unknown? Or is that
I don't know if I have an opinion on that, honestly.
Or is that just a controversy that needs to be uncovered just so people know?
Well, here's the bigger thing about it is, let's say that is true. If that's true, do you guys think it's just Twitter that did that? Or do you guys think it happened with Facebook, Instagram, YouTube? So if Elon did that and he actually exposed everyone, does that open up a bigger door where governments And people are like, we need to see the algorithms behind all big social platforms. Like, does that open the floodgates? I don't know. That's where I don't know if it's the right thing to do. Does that actually move us in a positive direction? If that's true, I'm not saying it is. If it's true and that happens, do we need that to be exposed sooner than later so that the outrage can correct it instead of it being 10 years down the road? Or does Elon be like, holy crap, people are going to go to prison for this shit? Like, you know what? We're just going to leave it. And another thought on that is, why else are high-level executives crying with the thought of Elon buying Twitter and open sourcing the algorithm? Is it just because of the ideas that they don't agree with? Or do they know that a lot of people are not going to be very happy with the way that they've run the algorithm the past 5 years? And that's why they're so upset.
It's like a massive deal. And I think that's why it's getting so much attention, because there's so many different avenues. Like, you know what I mean? Say like the actual activists of free speech, it really like appeals to the business people. It's like, oh, this is going to change. Like him doing this, just it hits almost every person in the world. The more and more I think of it, I think his main mission with buying Twitter is he is trying to make a better world. He doesn't agree with what's going on in these platforms, and probably exposing how it dictated will cause a better future in 10 years, that this won't be what wins elections. This won't be what decides a country's fate or decides how our economy's going, just based off of their algorithms.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, you know how we're coming up on, or apparently we're at the like 250 years where a civilization is supposed, or an empire is supposed to collapse.
Yeah.
They say like the United States is on the verge of essentially collapsing. The US dollar is on the verge of, collapsing. It's undermined. Do you think like Elon takes into account all of these different factors as well? And then, with Twitter, understanding the power that he's going to hold, maybe he won't expose things. Maybe he won't do things at the beginning, but then he knows like long term for the betterment of humanity, he has, because he truly has the goal of saving humanity, that he has this like power kind of at the helm where he can just basically, okay, well, I don't agree. This could, cause a collapse in society. Let's push, the algorithms this way, but it'll still be seen publicly. Like, you would still see it, but they would still push the algorithm to avoid certain things. And then when he's questioned on it, he would explain. You know what I mean? Like, it's...
Yeah. I'm not going to pretend like I know how Elon Musk thinks, but I think we would all agree that he probably sees the bigger picture that's even bigger than the bigger picture. Mm-hmm. Like, most people are like, look at the bigger picture. I think he sees the picture even bigger than that.
So do you think, like, in today's world, the biggest commodity is our attention? And do you think this play is just another play to get people to buy into what he's trying to do, say in like SpaceX, like his pursuit to Mars, all those things? No?
Actually, I personally don't see it that way. This could just be, we all have our own perspective and we just see the things that we like focus on, right? The way that I actually truly see the Twitter acquisition is I see Elon being like, tech actually changes political outcomes. People don't know it yet. Like, people think the government's the most powerful people right now. Tech companies are the most powerful people right now. They have more influence than the government, way more influence, because they dictate culture, and what people believe in culture will like dictate in a democracy the outcome of political systems. And I'm a firm believer on this. If you have democracy, the only way it works without failing is through enlightenment. You cannot have a functioning democracy without a high level education of all the people. And where do the people get their education from? They're not really getting it from public schools anymore, in my opinion. They get it from tech. So tech has influence on education, and how people are educated influences what they vote for and what they believe. So that influences the outcome of political elections. I think Elon looks at Twitter and a lot of the platforms and says, this shit skews so far left, and those are the ideas that people are like pushing. And there's a lot of right-wing people that are just continuously getting more and more banned. More and more people are going against him. You mentioned Tim Pool earlier. He's come under a lot of controversy. He's pretty right-wing. Rogan's come under a lot of controversy. And Rogan's on the left, as far as I know. Like, he's not radical left, but he's on the left.
That's where I think that's where it truly was exposing like kind of cancel culture. It was the whole Joe Rogan situation.
Yeah.
Like, the guy brings on people from both sides.
Yeah.
he brings on everybody that he just basically has people on that he wants to have an interesting conversation with. Right? And he'll challenge ideas too.
Yeah.
That's what people like, but it's just like,
he doesn't just sit there and agree.
No.
Like he definitely, like he's had some awkward interviews where he doesn't agree with some people.
Oh, absolutely.
It's like, oh,
Gets you fired up.
yeah.
You know, the one thing that I think we could, at least all of us will agree on Rogan is a good person. And despite everything that I'm saying right now about maybe some people going to jail, if it gets to that point with algorithms being exposed and that is true, I truly believe that everyone thinks they're doing the right thing. There's very few people in this world that are like, I'm doing the wrong thing and I'm going to do it because I want to see humanity fucking burn. There's very few people like that, in my opinion. Everyone thinks they're doing the right thing. The people that are shadow banning other people think they're doing the right thing. They believe they are. The people who are being shadow banned also believe they're standing up for the right thing. So I think the real problem here is an education problem, is that we're so divided. And that's what Elon, I think, is going to be like, you know what? Regardless of how divided you are, my platform isn't banning anyone because it isn't good.
And you think, it will unite people. It'll be a common platform that everyone can go to. It doesn't matter what you think, what you do.
I don't think it will unite people because of the way that group consensus works. Like individuals search for truth, groups search for consensus. If you have a group that's very left-leaning and you allow right-leaning ideas into it, even with a couple members, if you think of the group as a person, it dies because it can't survive with new ideals that are opposite from its own. So I think we're actually still going to see large divides. I think Elon's just going to come in and be like, I can't change the divides and I can't change your psychology, but I can provide a platform that isn't going to punish you for the divide. And I think that's the wisest thing to do, because allowing all this free speech and not leaning the platform in any political direction will help to even the odds in the political, like in elections, in my opinion. I think that's what he truly sees as the big end game is people just haven't realized yet that tech is influencing elections and electoral outcomes more than they think it is.
And I know I've said this before, Donald Trump literally based when he was going to run for presidency when he reached a certain amount of Twitter followers.
Yeah, and that
says something.
Like, man, like that's true on true. As soon as I forget the number, he's like, hey, I will have enough attention that when I do my campaign, I have more free advertising than anyone else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know,
And
which
you
is
think when he ran and then was president, the only thing you would hear on the mainstream media
is what he
was Trump.
what he tweeted.
Their numbers were nuts,
Yeah.
right?
Very controversial.
Do you think a portion of like a good chunk of the left is really upset thinking that Elon will bring Trump back on?
I think it's possible. It wasn't something that I ever thought about because they obviously do see Trump as a threat to humanity. That's what I mean by like, they all think they're doing the right thing. And that's where they probably do. It's probably a factor, maybe not for everyone, but for some people, I don't think there's any reason to think otherwise. But I do think that we should always remember that even the people who are your quote unquote enemy and think differently than you also believe they're doing the right thing. And like just to really think about that and take that into consideration.
Absolutely.
Like it really humanizes them, in my opinion, gives you empathy. And as far as I'm concerned, if we're talking politics here, I think you need people on the left and on the right, which is why I'm not on either side. People might try to place me on either side, but you need people on the right because they're more systemized. You need people on the left because they innovate. And the biggest problem of the world, and this is what I think will be the downfall of democracy, is that we can't agree on what to do. Like whenever any civilization fails, it fails in one of two ways. It either fails into chaos or oppression. Chaos meaning that the people within the country itself don't know how to unite and they bring it to its knees, or oppression meaning that from the top down, a government comes in with a communist regime and oppresses everyone to one ideal. China failed to, we'll say oppression, the West is failing to chaos. How do you solve it? You educate the people to stop fighting.
Interesting.
And you think that, so say like education too, is it more education in terms of like, obviously you're very enlightened, you're very, you know,
I wouldn't use the word
enlightened, but you know what I mean? Like you see other people's perspective, you can see both sides, you know what I mean? And you don't like, just because that person disagrees with you, it's not like you're going to think he's a bad person or whatever. They're just disagreeing. How do you teach other people to be like that? Because that's very, very difficult, you know?
Fuck, man. I don't even know if I know how to answer that question.
Yeah.
Because it could also just be a function of my personality in a lot of ways. Not to say it's like I just am this way, but You know, certain people are more disagreeable and more competitive. How do you teach those people to truly see like other people's perspectives and be open-minded to it when all they want to do is win? Like I think there's certain people that will struggle with it more than others, but I think empathy is really important and being open-minded. Like I think anyone can benefit from realizing that they believe things that aren't true and might be harmful to their lives. Like I told you guys the story of how back when I was in high school, or no, I was in college, and I was working a part-time job, going to college. I was so stressed and burnt out, and I was calling my mom, and she goes, well, because you're not a doctor who works on a yacht, or just a doctor that hangs out on his yacht all day, you have to go to work and make money. And I was like, wait, what? Like, if you're a doctor, how are you just hanging out on a yacht all day? Wouldn't you be working as a doctor? Like, that was just the first time that a belief created so much cognitive dissonance in my mind that I started to question it and be like, wait, so I've always believed that just if you're wealthy, you're just hanging out on yachts and just partying all the time. But then how do you make your money? So how would that be possible? And then I looked into investing, like passive income, business owners. Okay, doctors are hot, like make a lot of money, but they have to work a lot of hours. They're not really free, but they're high income earners. And it's weird as a belief as that is, and such a silly little one, it showed me that there's probably so many things that I believe to be true that I've never really thought about, I've never thought through, and I've just taken them as fact because I was told them when I was young. And I think there's a lot of things like that. Like maybe you grew up in a family that is really leaning towards one political side and you just never questioned it, because to question it would mean to break rapport with your group. When you start like being more free thinking and being like, hey, like what is actually true? Like maybe to answer your question, I would say if you hold the closest thing to truth as your highest value, you'll naturally look at other perspectives because you won't care if you're right. You only care about getting as close to possible as like figuring out what is right, which, you know, as humans, we all have filters that we filter stuff through. We can't even get there. Mm-hmm. We'll never know what absolute truth is. But if you hold the value of getting as close as possible to what is true, you'll realize that you're a flawed human with a bunch of beliefs that just needs to look outside of himself and look at other perspectives.
And that's probably profound in business too, right? Because we have the blind spots. If you can actually, seek the truth in what you're doing, you know, like it's just going to evolve you in every way.
It goes back to what we were talking about with the guy with BlackBerry.
Yeah.
An inability to look outside of himself and be like, what is true? What is the market doing? What is the best for my company? What if he detached from his ego and the company and said, the company and the success of it and being the forefront of the phone industry is my number one mission?
Yeah.
Then maybe he would have thought differently.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's like a function of learning to think about everything you do.
Everything.
And like, I guess not everything. Question everything you do.
Yes.
So that's maybe why, like, do you think, let's say for Elon, like, do you think he questions a lot of what he does? And that's what ultimately leads to him coming to better answers?
I think if you're a first principles thinker like Elon is, you naturally do. Like, I'll give you guys I don't have answers to these questions, but here's some things that people just take as like absolute truths, but they've maybe never thought of. Mm-hmm. Do we actually need winter tires, or is that just a function for companies to make twice as much money? I'm not saying you should get winter tires.
Dude,
I'm saying, have you ever actually looked at it? Have you ever researched it yourself? You know how on shampoo, it says that you should rinse your hair twice with it? Should you actually?
No. Have you heard of like, there's like the whole no poo movement. It's like basically people that they're not using shampoo at all.
Yeah.
I don't agree with that either, but I mean, so actually for some people it does work, but essentially, yeah, the rinse twice is a function of let's just burn the product. It's like, so here's an interesting one too, like supplements, take 4 a day.
Should you really?
Yeah.
But
then I have looked into some of them and it's, okay, well, we can only fit a certain amount in one capsule and your daily dosage needs to be 4 times that amount that we can fit in the capsule.
So
certain ones I agree with like that. Winter tires is a good one. I do think they work, but, and then I guess the wear on them through the summer.
I don't know. You know, here, the answers aren't really important. Like the main thing is like, have you ever even thought it through?
I've
Oh.
never questioned it.
Like there's so many things that you've never questioned. So many. And if you just start putting everything to scrutiny, you start to like really see what's behind the mask, right? Like marketing isn't truth, in my opinion. It sells more products. So whenever you see marketing, there's probably lower levels of truth. I'm not saying business is evil, because a lot of people will jump to that conclusion. They're like, well, businesses are evil because they want to make money at all costs. They don't care about humanity. It's like, it's a pretty fucking big blanket statement. So maybe you should put that one to scrutiny, because if businesses are evil, why does Tesla exist?
Mm-hmm.
So there's, you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a controversy there where everybody like hates on the billionaires. And they're like, they don't pay tax, they don't pay their fair share and all that. But it's like, you don't understand. Like, you eliminate the ability to become a billionaire, and that doesn't become a driving force for some people now. And then now a shitload of people are going to be out of jobs because somebody's not risking everything to become a billionaire, which then creates more jobs. Like, the only reason, Bezos is a billionaire is because he changed the entire world by creating Amazon.
And how many people does he employ?
Yeah.
He employs so many. Like he creates jobs, decent paying jobs for a lot of people.
And I do agree, like, there's some billionaires that are greedy and are not good. But that's like anything in life. There's always the mixture of everybody. Then you look at Elon, like, people are like commenting, why are we letting a billionaire buy Twitter? Like, people don't understand this guy doesn't give a shit about money. Like, it's almost better that he's a billionaire so he can do these things. Because if he wasn't, he wouldn't be able to go and buy Twitter. He wouldn't be able to go do things. Yeah. Let's solve the issue of traffic. Okay, I'm going to start a boring company. Right? Like, think about it. Like, without him having the resources, the capital, even the brand name, like, because now people believe in his brand and his mission of saving humanity. So people will literally leave a higher paying job to go work for one of his companies because they believe in the mission more than they actually believe in the money that they're getting from it.
So true, man.
Maybe we'll make a little bit of a pivot. So say like the millennial generation, and they're trying to start something new. Like, what can they do in the gig economy now that is such an opportunity for them that they need to take advantage of?
This is an interesting one because I actually kind of got this is where it opened my eyes to it. Is I'm a millennial. I grew up originally without technology. Well, the early days of technology, grew up without a phone for a while, then had a phone. And literally the only social media I had in high school was like Twitter. And then, the early days of Instagram, but I barely used it because we didn't use social media really back then, right? And then you think about it, 3 years, like people 3 years younger than me who grew up with the Instagram kind of social media landscape and started to learn that, I can create these e-com business because I see all these other guys. I can go drop ship and make a shitload of money. And what's interesting is there was like this gap where I found this out was I went to an event in Arizona and it was a 19-year-old kid that put it on, and he had like built a big personal brand and through podcasting and essentially growing through social media, right? And all these people I met that were, let's say I think 25 at the time, there's all these kids that were like 19, 20, 21 years old. They had these like crazy drop shipping businesses. They were like all into social media. They were like doing all these crazy things. And then there was like me who was like flipping mobile homes and real estate. And there was like other people around my age that were in kind of different business models that weren't as much in social media landscape. Mm-hmm. But the monetizable factor of like these young kids were making so much money in the early days because they were like, like they almost didn't have a bias towards it. Like we were almost at the age where we didn't really look too far into it. Whereas like they were younger, they grew up into it. Yeah. So they had they were so used to the technology. They're like, oh yeah, sweet, I can do this. Okay, I'll try this. I'll try drop shipping. I'll try all these things. So I think that's like where, when we talk about the millennial generation in the gig economy, I think there's actually a struggle there for the millennials to really adapt to it or to like be able to keep pace or learn it because their early years, they didn't grow up with it. And I think the early years, that's when you're like most influence susceptible to change. And as you get older, you become.
Well, that's even probably a lot to do with like how we're raised. Like say our parents, like my parents worked in the same industry their whole entire lives. My grandpa did that. That's like what you're raised. Now we're in the industry where it's like, hey, like you can change your career how many different times. Like we're in kind of like a little bit of the lull phase of like adoption of social media just started catching fire. Like when we're probably 20 years old or whatever, it became super, super popular. Moving ahead and now people seeing that and this is this is the biggest mistake that people have when they want to do something different. They see something on Instagram. Oh, I made $500 just today drop shipping. You know what I mean? But they know nothing about drop shipping. They don't even care to find out, but that's what they're going to do. So then they cold-heartedly try to pursue drop shipping. They fail. It's not what they liked because they're never truly into it. So that's the thing, like now being in this generation, find something that you enjoy. It could be an interest, it can be but if you're going to say you're going to start an e-commerce business, you better love designing a website or you're interested in designing a website. Even if you don't do it yourself, but you're like, how can I make this the best e-commerce website? Not just like, hey, how can I make a quick couple bucks? And that's why everyone's going to be failing. Is because they just think, oh, I saw that guy on Instagram talk about that. And they pursued it with the most lackadaisical approach they possibly can. They just think because he did it, I can do it. But really, that guy probably fucking loves drop shipping. He's like, I'm going to figure out the way how to make more profit than anyone else that's drop shipping. I'm going to be able to buy that product 10 cents cheaper, and then I'm going to charge 20 cents above the market, and I'm going to find it a quicker way for that person to get that product. That's how they think. Not, hey, how can I do this as quick as possible and make some money?
Yeah. Do you make a good point? That's why I actually stopped primarily working on real estate and I transitioned to gig economy, was because I couldn't compete with you at real estate and Mark and other guys like you as well. I was like, I don't love real estate enough to be able to compete with you guys. You'll always find deals before me because you're always looking. You'll always like execute at a higher level because you're more passionate. I was like, I did it basically just as like a cash play, and I did quite well with it. But I'm like, I can't scale this. I do not love this enough to scale it. I don't even want to look at properties today. I need to fucking pivot.
How long did you try to pursue it though?
I did 5 years.
Right.
So I gave it a good shot. My belief is anything that I'm going to do in a 5-year chunk, unless I'm like a year in and I'm like, I need to fucking quit.
Yeah.
But like, I will see it through for a 5-year chunk before I like officially call it in.
Okay, so maybe talk about just that journey, because I think that's the biggest thing that's missing from people getting ahead, is just what that journey is actually going to be like.
Yeah, and what you were promised.
Yeah.
Oh, for real estate.
Yeah. I'm curious to know like when you started, throughout your journey, what you were promised to what actually became.
So my real estate journey, I would say like most people, started with reading Rich Dad Poor Dad. You read Rich Dad Poor Dad, you're like, I want to be a real estate investor. Like, especially I was a young kid. I knew nothing about investing. And I will credit this book as the thing that opened my mind to business and investing possibilities. But that's a bit of a side tangent. So we'll leave that. So I read it. I was like, I really want to go into real estate. I ended up going to a Rich Dad seminar, and like I ended up doing a lot of like courses from gurus. So I took Black Card when it was in its infancy. I've taken like rent to own training, buy and hold training. Like there was a lot of it that I did. And a lot of the promise that I was always sold was, do you want to live off of cash flow? Do you want to have your time back? Do you want to retire early? And like, I truly believed it was possible, and I still believe it's possible, but I think it's a lot less likely than people believe. In my opinion, from doing it for 5 years, I believe that you either buy a bunch of properties in an appreciating market, you make a shit ton of money in 5 years off the appreciation, you then pay down one or two of them after you sell all the other ones, and you live off the cash flow because you have no mortgages. I think that's one way to do it if you can capitalize on an appreciating market. If you're going for like strictly like cash flow in markets that aren't appreciating, you're probably going to wait 20 to 30 years before you can actually live off the cash flow healthily, especially factoring in vacancy and repairs. Because it's not like you buy it and you never fix the property. A lot of like repairs have to happen. Even if you refi, you're going to have to update it for modern times if you want to still get maximum market rents. So off of cash flow, I don't know, even if you use JV money and you bought an apartment building, I think because you have JV money and you have a higher interest for one, maybe if you structure it as a partnership, it can work. But I think it's unlikely that when you first buy an apartment building, unless you get a wicked off-market deal, it's going to cash flow to the extent that you can just retire. So, and plus a time play, if you got to outsource management, you get higher expenses. You still got to deal with management though. Most management sucks. Like the whole delegation thing, just because you have a manager, like managing your properties doesn't mean they're doing it well and optimized. So you have to manage your manager. So you got to go through that. I think that like retiring off of real estate is a lot harder than the gurus make it out to be, but I don't think it's impossible. Like a couple of scenarios that I gave, I think the appreciating market one is probably the quickest way to do it if you have a market going gangbusters. Like here in Kelowna, if I would have bought 5 properties 7 years ago, I could easily right now sell 3 of them, take all, like I'd have a shit ton of capital, pay off the mortgages on 2 because there'd be like very minimal mortgages compared to the profits I just got, live off the cash flow of those 2 properties and still have a bunch of liquid cash. But I missed that train.
Yeah. Well, and it's just a learning opportunity. I think the biggest thing in real estate is people get, like you said, get promised they think it's going to be quick, and it is a very time intensive play. Yeah. So if you're not willing to dedicate an immense amount of time to perfecting it, doing it, even once you've acquired the properties, still managing them, you need to set your expectations right. I still do believe for 90% of people, the average consumer, it is the best investment they can make. But you make it on the scale that I buy 1 or 2 properties and it's easy for me to manage. The people that get into it thinking that they're going to be able to scale up to a massive portfolio and leave their job, it's tough. It is going to take you a super long time, and you're going to have to develop some amazing skills like raising money. Because eventually, whatever job you're working at, it all happened to us. You're not going to have infinite amount of money to buy as much property as you want. So you better become a great salesman and great at finding good deals. But a lot of people don't understand those constraints are really on you for a long period of time as a real estate investor. But having 1 or 2 properties is life-changing for any family. And it's relatively easy to manage if you just save up some money, you put your 20% down, you buy it, you run as a rental. Okay, I've held this property for 20 years. It hasn't cost me a lot of headaches because I just have the one tenant that I'm managing. It's life-changing, but just their expectations of it.
Yeah, expectations are unrealistic. And I agree, even like if you have 3 properties and assuming like the market doesn't completely tank in the time that you hold them and you lose everything or you can't cash flow it, that'll change anyone's life. Yeah, like absolutely. The properties I acquired in those 5 years have changed my life. Am I financially free and like just retired at the age like before 30? No. Have they changed my life significantly? Hell yeah.
Do you think they've changed your life because they taught you new skills to elevate?
That would be the biggest one. Yeah. Like, as you guys know, I've only ever done deals with JV money. So I've never used any of my own capital to acquire assets, well, real estate assets. That skill alone is huge. And understanding that in real estate, if you want to scale, you need other people's money. Like with the cost of housing, especially in Canada, you can't do it with your own capital, like unless you're like a fucking billionaire or something. The average person can't do that.
This is where I find very frustrating in real estate and being in it for many years, going to many seminars and all this, is the biggest pitch is the wealthiest people in the world hold the most amount of real estate. And what they leave out of that pitch is, sure, there's a group of people that made a lot of wealth through real estate, holding real estate over the years, the appreciation, all of that. But like the wealthiest people in the world built businesses, made a shitload of money, then parked some of that money in real estate. Not all their money. They parked some of their money in real estate. Yeah. And then they've diversified in businesses and all this. And it's all about diversifying your capital. Yeah. And I think that's something I had to realize, really diving into it and like going through the process of flipping for many, many years and realizing that that business model is fucking hard to scale. Yeah. And it's hard to scale to a large degree, right? Yeah. So you even look at like a really high level flipper is like the Ryan Pineda guy, right? Out of Vegas. He talks about how his focus now is not flipping as many properties a year because he's like, it's too capital intensive. It's too intensive when it comes to the amount of trades you got to do, management, all of this. He's like, I'm just going to focus on my education, my online business, you know, going on the crypto sector and all that. He's like, I'll still flip houses, still have some. But he's like, what it takes to scale to such a large degree is it's just too much capital outlay. It's too much time put in and all that. And it's not to say that, you know, there's people that can do it and there's people that can execute on it. You have to be so passionate about it to truly execute to that high level. For me, it was all about, like, I'm passionate about the design, the buy and sell process, getting the deal, going through that whole process, right? But the actual process of start to finish on actually getting the project completed, I'm not passionate about that. I'm more passionate about rather go build products and businesses and all these types of ideas, right?
Yeah.
So similar to you is like, I'm now in real estate for what would be almost 7 years now. And that process has taught me that, like, yeah, it's not where I'm going to build my largest amount of wealth.
Yeah.
Like, at the end of the day, it's not the driver, and especially with the way the world's moving.
Yeah.
So our parents' generation, yeah, they bought houses extremely cheap and got crazy good appreciation on those houses over the years, right?
Yeah.
And it's almost like that's been passed down to, like, our generation, the millennials. And it's like, yeah, the real estate is the best way for you. Like, you should own a home as soon as you can. You shouldn't rent. But, like, no, if your goal is to become a very great entrepreneur and you want to build great businesses, you should rent, keep your cash so that you can deploy it, and whether it be for scaling your business, deploy it into other opportunities, whether it be crypto, investments, all this. That's where you're going to get better appreciation than buying a house, you know, putting $100,000 down on a house and just sitting on that or the hopeful thought that it's going to appreciate when the market's crazy right now too. We don't know where it's going.
Yeah, no, 100%, man. There's so many points to, like, touch on in that one, but I think it might be a good opportunity because we're probably getting close to the end to actually like link it all back together to like flow and passion. And, like, it's as you said, like, I'm passionate at scaling businesses. In your case, you're like, I'm not passionate about real estate in particular. And I think this is a really important insight for a lot of people is your time is not wasted if you learn something.
Never.
Like truly. I did real estate for 5 years with a business partner who he eventually went out of real estate. And he, to this day, when I see him, he goes, real estate was the biggest fucking waste of time of my life. I never should have gone into it. I wasted 5 years. I'm like, are you serious, man? We learned sales. We learned acquisition. We learned how to raise fucking money for businesses. Like, the skills that we acquired in doing that, how is that wasted? Like, we learned realistically, like, the time it takes to build a business. It's even little things like that, where you have this idea of like, oh yeah, I'll just work 4 hours a week and just buy real estate. It's like, no way, man. That's like a full-time job on a full-time job.
Like, you learned how to handle failure.
You learn how to handle failure. You learn how to become more resilient. Like, there's personality traits and character that's built. There's skills that are acquired. Like, that 5 years in real estate, although I'm not going to primarily focus on real estate moving forward, is the foundation of everything I'm going to build after.
Absolutely.
So nothing is wasted if you reflect and learn. And a lot of knowing what to do comes from knowing what not to do. Right.
And do you think that just goes back to the story they're telling themselves?
Oh, 100% it's the story. It's not an empowering story.
Yeah.
Saying, I just wasted 5 years of my life on that. How the fuck is that empowering? Even if you spent, like, say 10 years in a relationship and it ended, like, let's say a marriage ends 10 years later, you're like, what a waste of 10 years. It didn't lead anywhere. Well, if you reflect on why your marriage ended and what you want in your next relationship, maybe that's the change and the catalyst that leads you to the best relationship of your life.
Instead of 20 more years of bullshit and unhappiness, you now learn from it, and then the future on, you're going to be better.
10 out of 10, man. Yeah. It's like I think you really only keep failing moving forward, or it was a waste if you didn't learn anything. And if you want to feel good about it, you want to feel empowered, I don't really see how you have much else of a choice than to learn from it and take it as a blessing.
Okay, so I'll ask you this question. You're the kid right now talking to your future self, or yourself 5 years ago. You're ambitious. You do want to do something differently. You do want to take this pursuit of going down business and entrepreneurship. What is your advice to that person right now? What would you tell them?
I would actually give them Landon's advice, and I would say just start. Even right now, you were very transparent at the beginning of this podcast. We're not billionaires. We're not multi-millionaires. We're, like, in a lot of ways, we have created a pretty decent level of success, I think we all would say, in business and entrepreneurship. And now we want to take it to the next level. So we've united and we're documenting our journey as we walk down those next steps. Like, okay, well, let's start a podcast. Let's start creating content. Let's look at launching products. Like, how do we do lead gen? How do we do more sales? How do we do scale? Like, just start.
Yeah, and I think another aspect to that would be just reflect, like you had said, right? Because the key to evolution is to consistently reflect.
Yes.
And look back.
Yeah. Look,
That's it.
That's just it. Take steps and reflect every day. That's something that I think a lot of people overlook is
People don't reflect.
If you just reflect, you will end up in a vastly different place in the future than you are now. Like, if you're willing to learn from your mistakes. And I think the reason is people think that there's a psychological bias, not to go too into this, but that we predict the future to be like the present. That's why when you watch Back to the Future, there's still newspapers, but there was iPhones at that time in real life. You know what I mean? So they predict the future to look like the present. And they don't understand that it's going to be different. So reflection is really interesting. People think that, like, oh, there's so many mistakes. Like, I'm always going to be making so many mistakes. Or, like, there's so much for me to learn. There's quite a bit of fundamental stuff that if you reflect, you'll learn. And you'll notice that 80% of the shit's figured out pretty quick. If you want to live like a good life, you want to be successful, it's not like you have to learn a million things. You just got to learn a couple things that you shouldn't do because you don't want to do any harm to yourself, and a couple things you should do every day. And you'll notice like 80% of it sorts out in a couple of years, and the rest of your life is just gravy if you continue down that path and optimize.
Yeah.
That's my take on it. Is there's only so many critical mistakes that you can make. If you reflect, you'll learn which ones not to make, and you'll be good.
And people really need to realize that if you want to change your life, you're going to have to do something different. You can't just keep staying on the status quo. Like, I know a big thing for me, if like I wanted to change my life, moving out of my hometown, getting around new people was something that's going to impact it a lot. So I made that decision. I'm like, I'm going to come to Kelowna. I'm going to change where I live. I'm going to operate everything I've built just for the opportunity to meet new people and have pretty much new opportunities, which has presented itself. And it's crazy how as soon as you start thinking and empowering yourself that you get to decide, it's no different than the person at your work, if they say something to you and it pisses you off and it ruins your day, that is your decision. You're pissed at what they said. You could have just brushed it off, disagreed with it, not do it, but you allowed it to ruin your day. It's no different. You are allowing yourself to stay exactly where you are now. And even if you don't have the money, you don't have the resources, you can change it. It just comes down to you. You got to find a way. And anyone can do it. Anyone. It doesn't matter where you're at. You know what I mean? Your skin color, whatever's going on. You can truly change what the trajectory of your life is or what you're currently doing.
Yeah. You know, if you either choose to take the empowering psychology around it and be like, okay, I believe I can change. I believe I can grow. I believe it's possible. And then maybe you'll make it. I can't guarantee you will, but maybe. But you can fucking guarantee you won't if you don't try.
Yeah.
So that's the thing is you either like just be like, hey, well, it's going to be tough and maybe I'll fail. So I'll just take failure as a certainty. Or you embrace uncertainty and you at least make success a possibility. It's up to you.
I think we end it there.
And that's it.